Good morning and welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I'm going to be continuing with Project Emerald and working on a detailed chapter by chapter outline. Hi, if you're new here, welcome. I am Aman. I speak about my writing journey, and this incorporates writing, reading, painting, and anything else that falls into play with the projects that I'm working on. I'm currently working on Project Emerald, which is a fantasy novel with a romance subplot. And in the past few videos, I have done a lot of brainstorming, figuring out my characters, my main plot, and I have also done like a basic beat by beat outline for the structure. And in this video, I want to go into more depth by chapter. So last night, I essentially looked at the 3-act structure that I currently have and made a guess at how many chapters I want for each beat. And using that, I am then going to go chapter by chapter and just do a detailed outline, which is going to make it so much easier when I actually pick up and start writing my first draft. So within this outline, I basically want to know what's happening in each chapter, of course, what the consequences are, how it leads on to the next chapter, and also the impact it has on my main protagonist. And if I have any other specific aspects that I want to incorporate in those chapters, for example, certain characters interacting with each other or certain tropes playing a part, then I will note that down as well. This is just so that I can really get it out of my head, put it down on paper, and figure it out and see it in front of me. So when I start writing, it will be that much easier to do so. So that is what I will be doing during this week. But first, I am actually heading to London for brunch with one of my friends. So let's head there. Good morning, everyone. It's been a couple of days and I have a few updates. Firstly, we bought lights because this space was looking so dreary, especially in the evening. So we bought LED lights and I can change the colors and things like that. So love that. Secondly, the brunch that I went to on Saturday was so much fun. I went to Waterloo and I always forget how busy London is, especially on the weekends. But it was nice to get out, especially because recently I feel like the only times I've been getting out of the house is actually to go to the office, which is not the life that we want to live. So it was fun to do that. And last we spoke, so in the introduction, I mentioned that I'm going to be starting this outline, which I actually am going to be starting today. However, I claimed that I was working on the outline via guessing how many chapters I wanted for each beat of the story. We're not going to do that because that's messy. And luckily, I watched this video which essentially goes into how to structure your chapters of your novel, which is just perfect timing. Essentially, you have a setup, a conflict, and a resolution in the novel as a whole. Then you have that same structure 3 times for each act, and this adds up to 9 chapters for each act and 27 chapters for the whole novel. Now that is overall an estimate. Of course, for some aspects you might want multiple chapters, for some you might want less, but this just gives like a rough guide on how many chapters and how to pace your novel. So I will link that video in the description below because she goes into it in more detail than I am. But essentially that's what we're going to be following. So 27 chapters, and we're doing an outline for that. Now I do think, because I had initially kind of guessed how many chapters I was doing, I need to review that first and alter it so that I have kind of a title for 27 chapters and I know what's happening in each of them. So I think that's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I will start actually writing the outline. I am so excited to do this. I don't know if it's because it's been a couple of days since I've worked on this novel, so I'm excited to get back into it. I don't know if it's a newfound excitement and enjoyment, or if it's just the fact that I am getting much clearer on what this novel is about, what's going on, especially because in the previous video, if you saw it, I cleared up a lot of things regarding world building, which helped me get back into the characters, figure out their backstories, and just get a lot more clarity on the story as a whole. And so I think that clarity has really allowed me to get excited about this project again. Otherwise, I kind of felt like I was a bit stuck. So we're back. We're going for this outline. And after I've done the outline, I think I can start writing the first draft, which is crazy, but let's get into it. Once I had completed the initial breakdown of the 27 chapters, I then began actually writing the outline. This started with bringing together all of my notes for each portion of the novel and using that to then detail up each chapter. I had a few main questions that I wanted to answer within this, as well as pinpointing the main arc of each chapter. Once I had completed the first couple of chapters using this structure, it became much easier to continue on throughout the outline. Hello, so it is the early afternoon now and I have been working through this outline. I have done 3 chapters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I had to first figure out how I was going to work through this outline. And as I started going through it, I've also been figuring out quite a lot of the details that were missing. So I've been getting into more depth in the outline, which has been super helpful and it's given me a lot of clarity. And now that I've kind of figured out the structure and the process of how I want to work through this, it should be a lot smoother from here on out. But I wanted to explain to you the process that I've been working to in order to do this chapter by chapter outline. Now, firstly, as I mentioned, I am using the 27 chapter structure, which again, I learned this from this video, which I will link in the description. But what I'm doing with this is I have initially, at the very start of this project, I did a beat sheet for the novel where I had all of the beats and I just wrote a sentence for each beat. I have used this and turned that into a 27 chapter sheet, essentially, where for each chapter I've written which beat goes where and then also what's in between if there are any missing gaps. So I have those 2 documents, and then I also have the third document, which is an outline that I produced a couple of weeks ago, like a detailed outline which just went into more depth for each beat, so for the hook, the inciting incident, and so on and so on. And I'm using all 3 of these documents to put together the chapter by chapter outline. So for each chapter, I have taken the information from those 3 documents, the portion that applies to the chapter that I'm working on, and I am then using that to put together an outline for the chapter. I have a few questions that I am answering: what happens, why it matters to the protagonist and to the plot as a whole, and then the consequences of it. And then also I have an arc for each chapter, which is the setup, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the hook. And I just have like a sentence for each of those, for each chapter, so that each chapter has an arc as well. And I'm doing that for every chapter. So it's taking a bit of time. There's definitely some depth and effort that goes into it, but I'm having a lot of fun. I think I've got the process of it sorted and figured out. So now I can apply that to the other chapters. So hopefully it will go a bit quicker now. Overall, it's been a lot of fun to get more into the characters, into the plot, into the world. I'm gaining a lot of clarity on those details and also the interactions between characters. If there's a dialogue piece that comes up, I will put that in. If there is a specific interaction I want to occur during one of the chapters, I will put that in. If there's a subplot or a trope that I want to arise during one of the chapters, I will also note that down. So I'm just doing a very cohesive outline for each chapter so that when I do start writing it, it's clear and it's in front of me and I can just start writing rather than being stuck and unsure of what to write about, essentially. So that is going really well, and I'm hoping that I can finish the Act 1 outline today and then do Acts 2 and 3 maybe later on in the week or on the weekend. But that is going super well. That is a process I'm using to do this outline, and it's been super helpful. I will also note down in the description the questions that I mentioned and the arc for each chapter that I'm using to do this outline. Maybe it'll help you as well. I want to do a reading update because I haven't done one in a while. I have been reading the ACOTAR series, which I know I'm very delayed, but it has been great. I've blitzed through the first 3 books in the past 3 or 4 weeks. I've just finished the fourth book, which is A Court of Frost and Starlight, and I will be starting A Court of Silver Flames, which is the fifth book, this evening probably. And I have loved the entire series. I know there's a lot of people that don't like them so much, but I have enjoyed them. It's a great way for me to get into fantasy books again. I am a lover of fantasy anyway, books and movies, but I had been struggling to find a series that I really enjoyed. I had a duology that I loved, but it was only 2 books. Obviously, it's a duology. So I've loved being able to get into a series, and especially during this time of the year, winter time, where it's colder, you kind of just want to cozy up most of the time. Being able to have a book and a series that can get you through the season has been wonderful, and it's also really helped me get excited for my own manuscript and wanting to write. So that has been a lot of fun. And now I'm going to continue with my Act 1 outline. Good morning, everyone. So it's been a couple of days, and one update is that I bought a new stool, which does not change your life, but it helps me because otherwise I was having to find these really weird sitting positions in order for the camera to see me, because otherwise I'm too short. So I'm so glad it finally came and I put it together. So I'm sitting on it right now, and it's actually really comfortable. But back to the outline that I've been working on. I am about 2/3 of the way through the outline, 2/3 of the way through Act 1 of the outline, and I'm thinking that today I can finish off Act 1 and at least start Act 2. Now, I have found that I have gotten into the rhythm of this process of writing the outline. I'm really enjoying it. It's definitely helping me gain clarity on the plot and also how to integrate the characters' arcs within the plot, so that has been super helpful. I do, however, think that there are some aspects or certain parts of the chapters that either repeat or might not work, because I have been looking at it like chapter by chapter individually rather than in a more cohesive manner. So I think either by the time I get to the end of Act 2 or maybe at the midpoint, I'm going to put a pause and just look at all of the chapters I've written so far, all of those outlines, and see if they make sense one after another. See if there are things that have been repeated, if there are things that I need to provide more detail for, or just in general make sure it works as a whole rather than just as individual chapters. So those are the 2 things that I'm going to work on. Firstly, continuing with the actual outline, finishing Act 1 and starting Act 2, and then secondly, making sure what I have so far is actually cohesive and makes sense. So let's just get straight into it. Hello, so it's been a couple of hours since I last spoke to you, and before I went on my walk, I actually managed to get through half of the novel for the outline. So I got up to the midpoint, so that is the entire of Act 1 and then half of Act 2. I then took a bit of a break. I went for a walk. The sun was actually out today, so I thought I might as well enjoy it. And when I came back, I then did my second task of the day, which was to look at what I had so far and make sure it made sense. Now, there are a few things that came up while I was doing this. So firstly, how I did this was I actually like to read it out loud to myself. So as I mentioned at the start of this video, part of this process of the outline is for each chapter, I'm essentially writing a sentence or a phrase for the setup, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the hook for each chapter. So I essentially read out loud all of those for each chapter, and when there got to a point that it didn't work or it didn't make sense, I would revise it. Now, there are a few things that came up here. One instance that occurred a couple of times were that things didn't quite fit in the place that I had put them. For example, an interaction with a couple of characters occurred earlier than it should have. So I would then move things around accordingly and replace them with something else that actually made sense for the location in the book that I had put it. So I don't know if that made sense, but essentially I rearranged things so that they actually made sense one after another. And this also included like moving chapters around. There were a couple of places where I had put an event in a chapter that should have actually happened later on, and I had put it too early, things like that. Another occurrence that happened that I fixed along the way was there are actually a few chapters where I had written the rising action being that they explore along the way, a climax saying something happens. That was it. That was all the information I gave for a few of the chapters. Now, it's fine for this to be for some of the chapters because these are things that I'll figure out as I'm writing the first draft, I'll explore on the way, and I'll likely change. However, to have it for quite a few of the chapters was stressing me out a little bit because it made me feel like I didn't actually know what was going on. So I then took this time to just first of all figure out where the characters were geographically in this world and what events could happen that would impact the characters, that would impact the plot, that would maybe bring about the main character's misbelief, how I could play with that. So I just started to explore a bit more, and this allowed me to give more details for the chapters that had initially had very little detail. So that helped me a lot, and I feel much clearer in what's going to happen. Now, as I mentioned, these are things that I will explore when I'm actually drafting it and may decide to change, but having a base makes me feel a lot better, makes me feel like I actually know what I'm writing about, even if it's just the very beginnings of what I'm writing about. So that has helped a lot. And yes, I've done that for the entirety of the outline that I've done so far, which is half of the outline. I have found that doing this outline has really made me understand the plot, the characters in much more detail, also get a clearer picture of the map of the world, because that is obviously impacting where the characters are, what can occur in this world depending on what location they're in, and how it kind of seeps into each other. It also demonstrates the route that the characters will take and how that plays on their story. So I've gained a lot of clarity in all of those things so far doing this outline. So I'm really excited to continue to do it. I am actually going to turn this video into a two-part video. So this is the first part, and in the second part I will be finishing off Act 2 and working on Act 3 of this outline. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe because I will be continuing to create videos regarding my journey of writing, my experiences, my thoughts, and other than that, I will see you in the next one. Bye!